Current administration talking about gun control.
Go after your guns, right?
Are you proposing taking away their guns, and how would this work?
I am. If it's a weapon that was designed to kill people on a battlefield, hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
I really wish the people that were wanting to take away guns knew anything at all about guns. Look.
Makes some excellent points here. Media always quick to about the guns, making it about the guns, always trying to ban the guns, the Democrats.
In this case, he's more interested in the weapons he used and the modification. In other words, how scary did the gun look? Yeah, okay, the aesthetics of the gun, they are way more important than the why for what drove this alleged attacker to do what he did. Mental illness, it's important, not to them, but it's important. Was he a terrorist? It's important, not to them, but screw it. It's not important. I mean, it's important if he was a terrorist and he was white. Then they would care. If he's a terrorist and he's with Antifa, if he's a terrorist and he's with the Democrats, if he tries to kill half the Congress, but he's worked for Bernie Sanders, they don't care. But this case, don't focus on the criminal, focus on the inanimate object. See, I'm a story guy. I know how to tell stories. I know how stories are structured. This isn't part of their narrative. They need to tell you about the white supremacists. They need to get you all hepped up on, even in our military, they're everywhere. And they're all in the red states. And those people have guns. They hadn't gotten to the gun part yet. They were still planting all the seeds that all white people are terrorists. Anybody who voted for Donald Trump is a terrorist. They hadn't finished that narrative, so now they've had to jump ahead in the story, and it kind of hurts the story. Where was all the talk about it doesn't matter, it's all about the gun, when a white man attacked a few Asian salons? Way back, last week. A few days ago, the crisis wasn't about guns. It wasn't about the inanimate object that can do nothing on its own. Now, all of a sudden, we're not talking about the shooter and motive. That was so last week. It was anti-Asian racism and the concerning amount of white supremacists that are falling from the rafters. That was the narrative. It was the narrative on January 6th, the riot at the Capitol. It was their proof. Apparently, it is so bad that they kept the military in place in D.C. to guard the temple in the holy city. Now, they didn't do that for the cities that burned over the summer, but your city, your house, your business is not the temple. So they stood down the military to root out all the white supremacists. They're still doing it. This week, I was reading about how white supremacists are all riddled in our police force. The Director of National Security has now issued a report addressing domestic extremism. Guess who's not in there? Nothing about Islamic terrorists. Nothing. It's obvious who they were targeting here. The real danger comes from, quote, narratives of fraud in the recent general election, the emboldening impact of the violent breach of the U.S. Capitol, conditions related to COVID-19 pandemic, and the conspiracy theories promoting violence. They go on. The IC assesses that racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists and militia violent extremists present the most lethal extremist threats, end quote. Oh, and this. The IC assesses that the U.S. extremists who promote the superiority of white race are the extremist actors with the most persistent and concerning transnational connections, end quote. Wow. Wow. So those who are promoting white supremacy, which I don't hear and I reject, they're the threat. But those who are now in our classrooms teaching our children about black supremacy or brown, anything but white supremacy, they're not a problem. Forget about the terrorists, forget about Antifa, BLM. It's the hordes of white supremacists. And the salon shooter was their latest example. Boy, they couldn't wait to tell us, that's how I knew this was all bogus. You know, you can tell when politicians and most people are lying to you. It's when they're talking.
Definitely some great points. Get this out there, like, share. I'll let y'all listen to the last couple minutes.
Initial moments after the attack in Boulder, the narrative was on full display. It's a white dude. You could feel it coming. There's so many examples of so many talking heads and leftists that were saying things like this. Here's Kamala Harris's niece, ready and waiting with a good hot take on all those violent white male terrorists. They're the greatest threat to our country. I could go on and point them out, but you know them. It's a waste of time. The initial appearance suggested this attack fell right into the mainstream leftist narrative. Crazy white men, that's the problem. The gun didn't play a role because it's not time to introduce that in the story yet. The suspect was identified as a 21-year-old Syrian immigrant. Not Joe Smith, not Billy Joel, or Billy Jones, or Billy Joel. You know, do you remember the time after 9/11 when we all said, please don't let that be an American that did that? It's weird because we don't do that anymore. Half the country is like, please let it be a conservative that did it. Before the shooter was ID'd, this is the tequila shot, quote, almost certainly a white man again. If it's black or brown, he'd be dead. Okay, so the police would have shot him. And then here's the chaser after the ID. Let's mourn the victims, not glorify the killer. Oh, okay, so now we're not supposed to focus on what intersectional category he falls under. Got it. Nope, move on to Plan B in the leftist handbook, because it goes like this. If the shooter isn't white and the victim also isn't white, they don't care. If the shooter is white and the victim isn't white, racism. If the shooter is non-white and the victim is white, go after the guns. It's a little flowchart on how to deal with guns. It's not about problem solving. It's not about letting a crisis go to waste. No, it's not. It's about control. Whether it's about race or the kind of gun used doesn't matter. It's about control.
Here are some of the men that have fought for our right to bear arms.